Hey. Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in. We're gonna add checkpoints.
Losing all of your health and having to replay the whole level from the beginning isn't fun. So let's make a checkpoint system. You simply touch a checkpoint to activate it, and when you do lose all of your health, the level restarts from the last checkpoint. For this, I'll create a new project using the Windy Woods template. If you already have a project to work with, I would still recommend doing this in Windy Woods first so you can get a good understanding of how it works before you add it to your own project. You also need some assets for this tutorial, so go ahead and download them from the link in.
Alright, sir. Make it happen. Right, can't click and drag. Gotta, like, import. Rather, you can't click and drag from the browser download. You have to click and drag from the file. Import asset package. Add all. Import. Okay.
The description. Then in GameMaker, go under Tools, click on Import Local Package, and then select the asset package that you just downloaded. You will see this, where you just need to click on Add All and then Import. From this asset package, you will get a sprite called SPR underscore checkpoint, which is under Sprites, Environments, and Interactive. If you open it up, you'll see there are two frames, one that is displayed when the checkpoint is inactive, and the other that is displayed when the checkpoint is active.
Clever.
And because this isn't an animation, we have set the FPS up here to 0.
Our real enemy is time.
Cool.
Create a new object and name this obj underscore checkpoint. Assign the new SPR checkpoint sprite to it.
Alright. Checkpoint. We're gonna put the sprite for that. So, I mean, as far as that, like, 2-frame thing goes, it's pretty clear that we're gonna be setting the image index to 1 on collide with player. Put it in interactive, I guess.
Now open the RM level 1 room, which is the first level of this project. Select the instances layer and drag some checkpoint instances into the room. I'll also add some enemies around these checkpoints so I can easily test losing and respawning. Now when the player touches a checkpoint, we want that checkpoint to activate and to save the player's information. So inside the new obj checkpoint object, add a collision event which will check for a collision with obj player. Now if you're using GML visual, look to this side, and if you're using GML code, then look here. First of all, we are going to use an if condition to check if the image index of the checkpoint is equal to 1. That means that the instance is on the second frame, which is the activated checkpoint, and if the checkpoint is already activated, then we don't want anything to happen.
Yep, that makes perfect
So
sense.
in that case, we simply exit the event, so the rest of the event doesn't run. Now if the checkpoint is not activated, its image index will be 0 by default, and the rest of the events will continue to run. So after the if block, we'll set the image index variable to 1, so the checkpoint displays its second frame and is activated. In the game, you can now touch a checkpoint and activate it. Now let's make the checkpoints.
I hate how my mouse does that. It'll just randomly double click when I click once. Need to figure that out. Okay, good. Setting that. Double check that our coin animation's still playing. Yep, good. Good. Cool.
Save the player's information when it's activated. In the same event, let's open an ini file, and that file will be called checkpoint.ini. These files are simply used to save information to the device. If this file doesn't exist already, it will be created automatically.
That's what I was wondering
Now
about.
let's write a number to the ini file. This will be saved under the section player. This particular value will be called x, and the value that will be saved will be the x of the other instance. In this event, the check.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this right, we're essentially writing lines of text to this ini file saying the player is at this x position, the player is at this y position, has this many hit points, has this many coins, and we're going to close that. And then I would imagine when we die, we're going to have something that will read this ini file and will read those values and assign everything to that. That's the guess. ini write real. Section string, key string, value, real. Okay? So we want y on this second line. We want HP. HP, and then we want coins. Oops. Okay. Now, why are you screaming at me? String literal was unexpected at this time. Is that a problem? Section of the ini file to write to, the key within the relevant section of the ini to write to, real value to write. Okay. Let's see how far this takes us.
Colliding with the player, so the player is the other instance. So by saying other.x, we are saving the x position of the player. Then similarly, we are saving the player.
No, this doesn't make sense, because that means if we jump and we hit this thing, every time we respawn, we're going to start in the air, right? Wouldn't it make sense to set it relative to a 0 y of the checkpoint? And frankly, why are we recording the player's x and y? Why not record the checkpoints x and y? Because then you spawn in the same place at the checkpoint every time instead of like relative to which angle you came at it from. That doesn't make much sense to me.
First y position, then its HP, and finally the coins. After saving all of these values, we are closing the ini file. This data will now be saved whenever the player touches a checkpoint. If you have more variables that you want to save, then you can add them here.
All flights have been grounded. Heavy storms are rolling in from the northwest.
Now we need to load this data back whenever the player is defeated and the level starts again. Open the obj player object and here add a new event which will be room start under.
Okay. Hold the buckets. Hold actually every single bucket.
obj player object and here add a new event.
We're going to the player object? Interesting. I'm curious why that is. We're making a new create event? Why aren't we just putting it in the old create event?
Which will be room start under
Room
other.
start. So why are we saying room start event? I guess the room start event doesn't make sense to me because how is that tied to another object? I guess we're saying on the room start, do this thing to the object. I guess I don't know why we're not just doing it inside of like a room object, but I guess room does that's not really a thing. So when the room starts,
This event runs when the room or the level begins. So if the checkpoint file exists when the level begins, we'll restore all the information saved in that file. In this event, we'll use this condition to check if the checkpoint.ini file exists. If it does, we'll open it. We'll then read a number value from the ini file. This will be from the player section and will be called x. We are simply using the same.
Okay, hold on. So this code is saying I need to walk through it myself before he tells me. If checkpoint any exists, open it, set x equal to this, y equal to this, HP and coins equal to these, and then close it. And then those values are relative to the player, and that's why we're in the player object. Okay. So we're saying x equals any read real player x. And then we can just copy that. Oops. Come on. Perfect. All right. Delete. Okay. So x, y, and then P, not hippo, coins, and then we need to close the file. Oh goodness, what is going on here? Okay. So on room start, if any exists, open it, and then what? Close? Yeah. Checkpoint.any. Semicolon. There we go. Okay. Oh, I don't need to specify it. Okay, that's nice. So it's just gonna close the last thing that's open. So I guess what that implies is that you can't have multiple ini files open at the same time.
Same names for the section and the key that we used when we saved this information. That value will be loaded into the x variable of the player. If the value doesn't exist in the file, then the same x value of the player will be loaded as a default. Then similarly, we are loading the y, HP and coins values and applying them to the correct variables. Finally, we are closing the ini file. If there are more variables that you saved, you can load them here. Our checkpoints should be working now, so let's run the game. I'll activate this checkpoint and then lose all my health. When I respawn, you can see that I'm placed at the checkpoint that I activated last. You can now go ahead and place as many checkpoints in your level as you want, but there is one more thing we need to handle before this system is finished.
Okay. So. Theoretically. If I hit play here, everything will work just fine. And that checkpoint will be a thing of pure art. Getting a lot of errors showing up. Try again. Okay. So checkpoint. Yeah, so it's this stuff. This stuff is breaking. Why is that breaking? Why would that be breaking? So that's the reading. Let's go to the writing. If image index equals 1, exit. image index equals 1 for initializing it. Any open. Oh! Ah! Ah, darn it. Oh, just a big dummy. That's all I am. There we go. There was no closing parentheses there. All right, let's try it again. So it was saying, you're passing a really weird argument into any open. Oh, whoops. What was that? Okay. There we go. So, if I go die in a fire, I should respawn back at that checkpoint. Skip over this one. Okay. Whoa. Okay. So we're spawning at 0. Okay. That's not good. Why? Um, what are we putting in here? Let's put a breakpoint in there and let's see what values we're getting here. Oh. What? That's weird. Why is it starting me over there? Okay, so... Oh, I think I might know what's happening. Go to object player. On room start, if file exists, checkpoint any open, checkpoint any, and then any close. So, checkpoint any exists, and that's our problem. And I'm guessing any checkpoint is not getting deleted, right?
HP and coins values and applying them to the correct variables. Finally, we are closing the INI file. If there are more variables that you saved, you can load them here.
Wait a minute,
If
hold
there
on.
are more
Okay, I thought we weren't wrapped in the if, but it's because we were looking at checkpoint, not the player. Okay.
variables that you saved, so let's run the game. I'll activate this checkpoint and then lose all my health. When I respawn, you can see that I'm placed at the checkpoint that I activated last. You can now go ahead and place as many checkpoints in your level as you want, but there is one more thing we need to handle before this system is finished. The checkpoint file that we save is only relevant within a level. If the level is finished or if the player quits the game, then that file should be deleted. Otherwise, if it wasn't deleted, you'd run into different kinds of bugs. So we want that file to be deleted when the player quits the level, when the game ends, and when the game starts. Open the obj persistent manager object. In this template, this object is marked as persistent and it's created in the first room, so it exists all the time throughout the whole game, which is why this object is perfect to capture events like game end and game start. Add the game end event to this, which is found under other. This event runs when the game is closed. Now in this event, we'll check if the checkpoint.ini file exists, and if it does, we'll delete it. Now we want the same to happen when the game starts. So I'll right click on this event, click on duplicate events, and then duplicate it as the game start event.
Okay. So duplicate other game start. And then I'm assuming we're gonna do it again for... Oh, there's one else. Game start, game end, what, room end, maybe?
And now that that's handled, let's open...
Just want to make sure I got the code
file.
right there. Okay.
Game Manager, which is placed in every in-game level. We want this object to delete the checkpoint file when the level ends and the player is alive. That can happen if you successfully finish a level or exit through the pause menu. If the player was defeated, then the checkpoint file shouldn't be deleted because then you'd need it to restore the player's properties according to the data in that file. So let's open the room end events and scroll to the bottom. Here, let's check if the obj player defeated instance does not exist in the room. That particular instance would only exist if the player was defeated, and if it doesn't exist, it means the player is alive. Of course, if you're using your own projects, that might have a different mechanism to check if your player is alive or not. That may be a simple variable in the player object or some other object that you create when your player instance is defeated. So if the player is alive, then we check if the checkpoint file exists, and if it does, we delete.
This is the problem with going back and forth between GML and code. That there's an if file exists. Files. If file exists, this is checkpoint.ini. Then delete file. Checkpoint any. This is saying if the object player is dead. Oh, object player defeated. That's where my logic was going wrong. Okay, so if player... So we're checking if the player is not defeated when the room ends. Then, so if they have not been defeated and the room ends, which means they won, they beat the level, delete the checkpoint any. If it exists. That's interesting. Object player defeated is probably what's allowing them to change that sprite and stuff. I guess you would want it to swap out because you don't want it to interact with anything anymore. You don't want the same old logic. So like, it would suck to have your character die and then change the sprite, trigger a sequence where they start falling down, and then they hit another enemy, and then they, like, you know, keep on interacting with stuff, or pick up power-ups as they go down, or whatever, you know?
So this should complete our check.
Okay. There we go. Oh, but I did unfortunately put us... I thought that might happen. I did put us in the ground. So let's try again. Weird that the player sprite is just like a little bit bigger than the grid. Okay. So we've got our checkpoint. Let's see what happens when we die. So, is it not writing correctly, or is it not reading correctly? Okay, so let's go ahead and do it in debug mode. Let's see what happens here. So we should get... There we go. We've got our breakpoint. So we're writing... It looks like we're writing quite a lot. So we're writing... Okay, never mind. Got it. So we got X of 1805, Y of 1343, HP of 3, and coins of 0. Then move into movement. So it seems like it's being written correctly. Okay, so our HP is being written as 2. We have different X and Y values now. We have 3 coins. You know, I'm gonna set another breakpoint in the room start thing. You're not gonna be able to see this. Okay, right. We need to set this breakpoint in room start. Okay. So we can go back to our debugger, hit play. And then... Okay. So it's saying our X is 1280, our Y is 1536, our HP is 3, and our coins at 0. That's weird. It shouldn't. Those should all be different values. We should have 2 hit points. We should have 3 coins. We should have a different X and Y. Oh my gosh, I'm a big old dum-dum. I'm a big dum-dum. The dum-dum is quite large. Are you all seeing the problem here? Because I didn't see it for quite a long time. And it's a big dum-dum problem. We are setting X 4 times. We're setting X equal to the coins, which was 0. All right, Y, good. HP, good. And coins, good. Okay, try this again. And we're not gonna do it in debug mode. Let's just see what happens. Got hit, got hit. We're dead. There we go. So let's take a hit, grab some coins, run to the next checkpoint, and then die. I'm a little concerned the checkpoints are not, like, updating. We got 7 coins, 2 hearts. No, it is working. Hey, Frabjus! Go team. Awesome. We're on the last. Wait, no, that was the last tutorial in GameMaker. For Windy Winds. Hey! We understand the Windy Winds project. I mean, I'm sure there's a whole ton of complexity in here that we haven't really dove into. Like, for example, one thing I'm curious about is how are we detecting that the player has jumped on top of the enemy instead of yeah, I want to see this enemy parent. Can we open in a new window? So we're going to expand that. We're going to bring that shut because we're not wanting to edit. We just want to observe and understand. So if your velocity y is greater than y, this event runs when the player collides with an enemy. Yes, it's colliding with the enemy parent. It checks if the player has fallen on top of the enemy, in which case the enemy is defeated, otherwise the player gets hurt. This condition checks if the player's vertical velocity is greater than 0, meaning it is falling. So if B-Box Bottom, which sounds like a killer rap name, B-Box Bottom. This read-only variable returns the Y position within the room of the bottom of the bounding box for this instance, where the bounding box is defined by the maximum width and height of the mask for the instance. Okay. Even when a sprite has a precise collision mask, the bounding box exists and is used for certain things, and so you can use this variable to find it. Please note that when the instance has no sprite assigned, the value returned will be the same as the instance Y position. But when the instance has no sprite assigned, the value returned will be the same as the instance's Y position. Interesting. Okay, great. Got it. So we're checking if the bounding box minus their velocity is less than the top of the bounding box minus other dot velocity y. So we're checking if our bottom minus velocity y is less than the enemy's top minus their velocity y. Okay. Let me go to my whiteboard. So it sounds to me like we're checking. We have box, the player, and then we have enemy. And this guy has velocity of, let's call it the same thing. Velocity y 13 at this point. And the enemy's velocity is probably going to be 0. Except for like that jumping enemy, but we'll deal with that later. Let's assume just the enemy that walks back and forth. So their velocity y is 0. So what we are checking is the y value of this B-Box Bottom with the hit new album is at, I don't know, let's say 130. It's at 130y. And then this guy's B-Box Top is as tall as the sprite is. So let's say 32, because it looks about 1 square's worth in the grid. So what we are asking for is B-Box Bottom minus velocity y less than B-Box Top minus velocity y. And let's change the colors of all these to make it a little more clear for me, because this whole other thing just breaks my brain. Oh dear. All right. So let's bring that over. Then you. Great. So you're black, you're red. So if my B-Box Bottom minus velocity y is less than B-Box Top minus their velocity y, and that translates in this instance to 130 minus 13 and 32 minus 0. I do that. There we go. Trinket. And so then that becomes, what, 117 and 32. So, if the enemy was jumping, that velocity would be a negative. And so they would be adding to it, right? So that would effectively be checking if they're moving upwards or not. So if that is the case, then do stuff. But it is not the case in this example. And for it to be the case in this example, it would have to be something like 40, right? The bottom of my box is 40. We have now pushed downward, or we have fallen downward a bunch, which then sets this to 40, sets this to 27. Now, this value is less than this, which is basically saying we have collided from the top. Because let's look at a different example. Let's say we had collided into each other horizontally speaking. So velocity y would be 0. V-box bottom would be 0, right? And then we would just say 0 minus 0. And then that would be 0. Oh, but that's okay. So that's why we have our initial check of is velocity greater than 0. So before any of that would ever happen, we'll put a square behind that. This would never happen because our velocity y equals 0. In which case, we scroll all the way down, and we're checking if we have invincibility. No hurt frames. It checks if the player is invincible. Checking if no hurt frames is greater than 0. If that timer is good, then exit. Otherwise, declare temporary variables, hurt the player, the sign of X. This section hurts the player because it only runs if the player was not found to be jumping on the enemy's head. This action gets the sign 1, 0, or -1 from the enemy's position to the player's position. The sign is multiplied by 15. Oh, and that's a very clever way to do the knockback. Okay, so you take the sign of the intersection. So my X minus their X will get you a positive or a negative. If it's positive, then you're on the right. If it's negative, it's on the left. Then you multiply that by 15 and put that into velocity X. So you bounce back horizontally. And then you change the hit points by the damage of that enemy. And then you set in knockback to true to tell the player that it's in knockback. Oh, and this is going to deal with that whole, like, you can't move because you're in knockback. Okay, this is a much more elegant way to do what I was trying to do before. In knockback true, and then you set no hurt frames to 120, saying you can't be hurt for 120 frames for 2 seconds. Now, what's interesting to me is this is just a number. We're just setting a number equal to 120. So we have to, at some point, at some point, we have to start using that as a variable in some sort of alarm or something, right? We change the sprite to be player hurt, and then we run an alarm for 15 frames, applying to self. So there should be an alarm event in here. Alarm 0. There we go. So we're once after that 15 milliseconds is up, we change in knockback to false, so now we can be hurt. Or no, now we can move, and then we reset the sprite back to idle. So we still have no hurt frames that we're dealing with. So when is no hurt frames coming in? We have variable no hurt frames is greater than 0, exit, sure. But when does that start to decrement? Because so far as I can tell, we're not really like doing anything special with this variable, right? Can do a live preview. Can I do a live? Jeez, GameMaker, what's going on? Boy, I think GameMaker just crashed. Or maybe not. Okay, live preview. So we're setting no hurt frames equal to 120. And that's all we're doing. We're not doing anything else special with that. And then we play that, oops, that sound. The life lost sound effect. Okay. So like this all makes sense except for the no hurt frames. Can I do a search for like no, do a control F? No. I can't search for no hurt frames. That's a very big bummer. Cause yeah, I'm curious, when are we decrementing no hurt frames? So anyways, I'm understanding this now. We're checking if our velocity is greater than y. So that would allow for the following situation to exist, where we are up, but we're hitting the side. So velocity y equals, 12, b-box bottom equals 20. So velocity y is greater than 0. So we kick into our next if, and that would become 8 is less than 32. And that would be true, right? This checks if the bottom point of the player's collision mask was above the enemy mask's top point in the previous frame. How was that working? Is it because 1 frame ago we would have been like this? In the previous frame? I guess we would have been like, higher. Well, but this seems to like still make sense though, like I'm not seeing how this logic is accomplishing what they're saying it does. Let's go to the live preview again. If b-box bottom minus velocity y is less than, so if the player's bottom minus their velocity, you're minusing their velocity, and if that's a negative, that means they're moving up. If it's positive, that means they're moving down. So that velocity y, in this instance, is going to be a positive number because we're already checking if it's greater than 0. And if it's if it's less than 0, it means we're moving up, which means we don't even check this. It's damage. If it's positive, there's a chance we are above them. So we're gonna take the bottom of our bounding box, subtract our positive y value, which means the falling rate. Oh boy. You know what? I think this is gonna have to be something for another time. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time.